Welcome to the program. Our guest on this edition of Talk to Al Jazeera is the French Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Bernard Kouchner. Mr. Minister, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Your government is pushing hard, along with the US administration, for the imposition of new sanctions against Iran for its pursuit of its nuclear enrichment program. But the Council is clearly split. In fact, you just came out of a meeting where the tone was said to be quite rough. Why are you unable to convince the Chinese and the Russians of your misgivings?
We did convince the Chinese and the Russians. We are still together on two tracks. Negotiation, waiting for El-Baradei's report, and working on sanctions. Why? Because after three resolutions from the Security Council, in fact, the Iranian didn't stop the enrichment of uranium.
But the Russians, the Chinese, the British were on board initially when the Security Council passed a resolution with sanctions against Iran. This time they're clearly not. Neither China nor Russia, not even the UK.
How many times would you accept the truth? They are still on board.
But are they on board? Are they heeding your call for immediate sanctions, additional sanctions?
Not immediate sanction. We all agree to wait for Mr. Mohammed El-Baradei's report and Javier Solana's report. But the two reports must be given back to us in November. Meanwhile, we are working on sanctions, and we started this morning, and there is a meeting of the political director in few days, in 2 weeks, I believe.
But is your position also being challenged because the facts are there? China and Russia do not necessarily believe your claim and the American claim that Iran is indeed pursuing a nuclear weapons program.
No, they are threatened, they are on board. Also, we are absolutely determined not to accept the proliferation all over. This is a huge danger for all the world, but mainly for this region.
But Iran says its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes, and under the IAEA framework, the Iranians are not in breach of their obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They can enrich uranium, can they not?
Believe me.
Is international law on your side?
Of course, yes. International law is Security Council resolution. 3 Security Council resolutions asking to stop the enrichment of uranium. This is the international law. And not only that, but our Iranian friends, they signed in 72, it's not from yesterday, 72, they signed the Treaty on Non-Proliferation. This is the international law. Don't reverse the charge of proof, please. So I don't know if they are developing a nuclear military program, but we don't want them to develop that. And so it's very easy. They have to stop the enrichment. But meanwhile, of course, we are working to prove that we are very serious and determined.
Now, Iran, of course, rejects the legality of Security Council sanctions. They say that this issue has become a political one. So
it's always a political one.
Well, is the Iranian nuclear dossier being used to ostracize the Iranian government and to bring about regime change?
What do you mean ostracize? There is a law, international law. They are not following that law. They refuse. Is it right? No, it is not. Do they have the power to develop a nuclear civil power? Yes, they have. And we are offering them the all means, not only to follow, but to develop. And they started years and years, more than 20 years ago. So this is very difficult, and all the experts of the world are very suspicious. So we are too. We are not experts in atomic and physical science, but we are experts in politics. This is very dangerous.
Much seems to have changed at the United Nations from that showdown in February of 2003 between US Secretary of State Colin Powell and the French Foreign Minister Dominique de Villepin over the alleged Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, which were never found. Today, the US and France seem to be equally convinced that the Iranians are pursuing nuclear weapons. What is the basis of your conviction?
That's why we're waiting for the report of Mohammed El-Baradei and the agency. Yes, we agree to wait for this report. We'll see.
Are you saying you're not convinced that they are developing a nuclear weapons program?
We are not convinced because this is not the way to develop civilian nuclear power. And we are very suspicious, not us, not the French, neither the American, but the rest of the world, all of us. And so we agreed with the American after, but the French, first they agreed to wait for Mr. Mohammed al-Baradei's inquiry. So we'll see.
One has the feeling, though, that history is repeating itself, with the difference being that this time there is a French-American tandem rather than a British-American one.
There is a common interest for these 6 nations, including Russia and China, and for the rest of the world, not to allow anybody, not only the Iranian, not to allow anybody to set up an atomic bomb. That's why we are insistent, because they refuse to stop the enrichment of uranium, which is not necessary for the Iranian to set up a civilian nuclear power.
But it doesn't mean either that it is in pursuit of a nuclear weapons program.
No, we have no evidence but a large suspicion. And why didn't they stop for a while? And we'll see. So now we are very flexible. We accepted this mission of the agency, the UN agency of Mohammed al-Baradei. We are waiting for the result in November. Then meanwhile, we are working on sanctions.
But the Iranians will say that they have the right to enrich uranium. Now, this brings about the perennial question.
No, they have no right, because the right is not dictated, but it is voted unanimously 3 times in the Security Council of the United Nations. The right is there, not on the Iranian side. If they want to develop a civil power, nuclear civil power, we'll help them, no problem. They have the right, more than the others. Why not? Because they are producing oil and it will be finished in 20 or 30 years, I don't know. So they have the right, but not to develop atomic bomb in such a very dangerous area.
This will bring about the question that many ask of double standards, that what may be okay for some is not okay for others.
That's true. It was okay for some because they developed this so-called atomic power before. Then we signed all together a treaty on non-proliferation. And this is not absolutely not targeted on Iranian. The problem is that if the Iranian develop a nuclear bomb, all the area will develop it. And proliferation is more dangerous than everything in the world. That's why, and they sign themselves. The Iranian, they signed the treaty of non-proliferation.
But does the French government have the moral authority to decide whether or not Iran can develop
the French
nuclear
government
power if they so chose?
Why are you asking the French government? We were unanimously in agreement in the Security Council, including the French government, but the Chinese, but the Russian, but the American, but the Brits, and us. So we are representing a very important voice in the world.
But I ask the question because many will say that, well, France developed its nuclear program secretly.
But you were not born. It was a long time ago.
But I do know about it. And that the US was against it. They tried to stop you but failed. And that France was instrumental in supporting Israel.
If you want to change the order of the world, do it. But for the time being, the order of the world is coming from the United Nations system. And the United Nations system inside, not only with the 5 permanent members, but also with the 10 others, Security Council decided to ask firmly to the Iranian to stop enrichment.
Well, there was much hype in the 70s and 80s about the so-called Islamic bomb. Pakistan developed a bomb. The world did not collapse.
What do you mean? I'm not so sure. Some developed the bomb. You know, Northern Korea was developing the bomb, and we convinced them to stop. Why aren't we on the same movement, right, in asking the same thing to the Iranian? Why? And we succeeded with North Korea.
Well, what do you mean when you as France say that, and I quote from a speech you recently made in Washington, that an Iran with a nuclear capability is for us an unacceptable prospect? What does unacceptable prospect mean? Because you're speaking as France, which is a nuclear weapon state, so that increases the stakes exponentially.
Don't stop the movement of the world. Some countries, they had a guarantee of the balance of terror in that time, you know, atomic bomb on both sides. So we did. We stopped the proliferation of that. We signed an agreement. And this is the law of the world, this particular agreement. We are not targeting especially the Iranian. We are targeting everybody. We did with the Korean. And we succeeded. For the time being, we didn't succeed with the Iranian. We have to, and don't ask only the French, even if I'm French, and the American. All the Security Council members were there. Unanimously, we voted, including the Chinese and the Russian. So why are you asking only the French?
Well, because I'm sitting with the French foreign minister.
That's a good answer.
But how far are you willing to go to prevent this from happening in Iran's case?
How far? What do you mean by how far? As I told you, on one side we have to negotiate. We'll send Javier Solana and some other minister are talking to Iran. I'm talking to the Iranian, no problem. We are waiting for their report, Javier Solana's report. We are waiting for Mohamed El-Baradei's report, I hope before the end of November. Meanwhile, we are to prove that we are really solid and serious working on sanctions.
We're taking a short break now, but join us for more on our conversation with the French Foreign Minister.